All right, this is exercise 2D, the end of our juiciness module. In this exercise, we're going to do two things. One, we are going to create our first basic shader and make the opening of our main menu more interesting. And then we're going to stick a little pair of eyes on our pedal and make them follow the ball. So give a little bit of life to our pedal. So I'm starting on the main menu scene. And what we're going to do is add a checkerboard material to the viewport, and we are going to make it shift and change over time. So to get started, I honestly forget if I've done this step, so I'm going to step you through it. First thing, we're going to use the shader graph. We are not going to be creating shaders by hand. And so if you go to Assets Create in the top here and you do not see a shader graph entry, then you have to install shader graph. So what you do is you go to Window, Package Manager, and I'm going to change this packages to Unity Registry. It will probably start in Projects or My Assets. You want Unity Registry, which is all of the packages that Unity has, and you will type in the search bar shader graph, and here you go. There will be a button here that does not say remove. It might say download or install. You click that button. It will download and install a bunch of stuff. There will also be a couple new or different changed project setting files, so make sure you commit and push those as part of the project when you're done. So once you have that, we are good to go. And let's set up. So a shader, objects do not use shaders directly. They use materials which then use shaders. So we're actually going to set up a basic thing, and then we're going to make it more interesting. So we're going to right click on main menu. We are going to create a 2D object, sprites square, and I make it all zeros, and I'm going to stretch it to the edges of the viewport. So this means when I start, I'm probably not going to see anything, of course, because this is going to cover up the, if I hit play, right now I can't see anything. My font has disappeared. Make that back to the normal scale. I can still see the button, but very ugly. Now if you look at this square, I'm going to call this background. All sprite renderers use a material called sprites default, and also it is set to shader sprites default. So this is actually the thing. We're going to create a new material and also a new shader. So I am going to go to Assets, and I'm going to make a new folder, create folder, and we're going to call it shaders. We also potentially want a different one for materials, but right now I'm just going to dump everything in here. So let's double click there. We have an empty thing. And now I can create a shader graph built-in unlit shader graph. I could also start with a blank, but I want built-in unlit. So we're going to call this main menu background. So it is an unlit shader because sprites do not really interact with lighting. You can kind of fake it, but in general, you want an unlit thing, which means this doesn't have nearly as many different things you can override, which is fine, because we're going to start simple. So we're going to start here. So this has vertex positions, which we are not going to play with in this. exercise, and it has a fragment shader of only base color. Lit shaders have a lot more different things. Also, we can do overrides. We can have opaque or transparent. We're going to be opaque. We can decide where we're going to render to. We can do a bunch of depth things and alpha clipping. But right now, we're just going to do a fragment shader, and we start only with color because that is unlit things do not interact with albedos or roughness or anything like that. We really just want this to be a sprite, a bitmap image. So it starts gray, so it's got a base color of gray. And in fact, let's just make this function so we can go back and forth and see things work as we go. So I am now going to create a new material next to main menu. So I'm going to call new material, and now I'm going to call this main menu matte. So it starts gray, and it starts as a standard shader, which has all this stuff in it. And we're going to switch it to, and search for main menu background, and then it has basically nothing. It has all this other stuff, but very little. So here we go. And now I'm going to drag this material into there, and now we have a gray field, which really isn't that interesting. So Control S, there we go. So now if we go back into here, we can do a fun thing. Let's add a variable. We're going to add a color. Now we're going to call this main color. So this is the main color, and I'm actually going to drag this out into the world and hook it into base, and then switch that to black. And that's because I actually added a variable. So if I go not to the shader, but the material itself, let's go back in here, let's select the material. Oh, so the problem here is I didn't save it. So Control S. Yeah, that saved it. That actually changed the main material to black. Now the scene is also black. And now if I select this background, now I have surface inputs of main color, and I could change this to, say, red. Let's blind ourselves a little so we will see an obvious change when we hit a change. So here we go, blinding green. And let's go back into the material. I'm actually going to create a second color. Nope, not float. Delete. Color. Secondary color. And we're not going to be able to use that yet because right now all we're doing is basically saying we have one color, and this one color which we set is going to be set to every color. Every pixel is that color. So this is a shader, so it is massively parallel, but right now all it's doing is saying, okay, for every pixel, change that pixel to this, whatever this main color is, which is our bright green color right now. So let's make this more interesting. So we can right click and get create node, and Unity builds in a bunch of cool nodes for us. So we're going to say checkerboard. And so this gets us, actually, I'm going to delete main color for now. And I'm going to go from checkerboard out into our base color, which changes that. And then I go back to the scene, and suddenly we have a giant checkerboard of gray and black. So, so let me show you something which might look intimidating, but also we are never going to edit these directly. But what this does is I can actually open this code. So we're actually writing high-level shader language stuff in the shader, and Unity is creating this stuff. So it's actually creating this gigantic shader, which you probably can write in a much more simple way, but that's one of the things we have to deal with when we have Unity construct shaders for us. So it actually has this checkerboard float, which says UV and has a frequency. So basically, UV is X and Y. So it basically gets all this stuff and says if you are at a certain part of the screen, you're black, or the first color, and if you're a second part of this different part of the screen, you're the other color. So it just uses all these alphas and frequency limiters and scales and all this stuff to say if you're on a certain part of the screen. So if you go, let's go to the scene, right? If you're going kind of halfway through the screen, we're black, and then if you're V, U, V, so if your U is bigger than this point, then you're this color. If it's smaller, then it's this color, and same thing in the other directions. Right. So it does all that math for you. You don't really have to worry about it. But you may have noticed that my green disappeared. So one thing we can do is we can now drag our colors out, main color and secondary color, and stick those into the color boxes. Now I can save it, and I can go back to the scene, and now it's green and black. That's because if I go back here, we have green and black. So we can actually have green and red. Let's really destroy our retinas right now. But I could set these to whatever we want. If I want different versions with different checkerboards, I would make new materials that use that shader and then change the colors. So let's make this a little bit more interesting. So we also have frequency. So if I set the frequency to 2 and 2 and save it, we're still exiting out of this here, and that's because I don't know what these colors are, and they don't have defaults. So I have to kind of come back to my scene, but see, now it is doubled. If I come back here and make it 3 and 3, so that should be 6 and 6 across, I believe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yep. So the bigger those numbers, the smaller the boxes, the more there are. So that is good, but let's make this a little bit more interesting. So basically what shaders do is they take inputs and then modify them in some way and then stick outputs out. So, and we do that basically through multiplication. So let's first do some craziness. So let's create a node and let's do math SIN, sine wave. So we're going to make this color a sine wave. So we're going to grab this color, stick it in here. Sorry, don't want to do that. This is a sine wave. And we are going to multiply. So we're going to multiply sine wave by our color, and then there we go. So what this should do is, oh, that changed color. So now if I go over here, this probably won't happen unless I hit play. Nope, that's because I'm not done yet. Sine is time-based. So, time. There we go. Delete, I don't just want a sine wave, I actually want a sine of time. There we go. So this is going to modulate, go from 0 to 1 to -1 and multiply that by a color, which means it'll bring it to the color and then to black, I believe. There we go. And we did the main color, which is green. So green does this. This is actually happening while I'm in editor mode. If I hit play, it will be a little bit smoother. There we go. So it goes to black, signs all the way up to green, and then stays there, and then comes back down. So, still pretty ugly. I can do a similar thing where I could do multiply, and let's say I want the two colors, so I'm going to do cosine, and then drag the secondary color in, and stick that in the other color, and save it. And now I'm actually going to get these two colors that modulate differently because the sine wave curve and the cosine wave curve are offset. So now we get this very interesting view of color. They change color at different times, at different frequencies, and I could potentially multiply or divide time to make them go also faster or slower. But now we have this animating background with all these nodes. So that's kind of the basics. There's lots of other different boxes you can feed, because basically what I'm doing is I'm saying, well, we have two colors, and they feed into this checkerboard pattern, so depending on the frequency, it sets up checkerboards, and then also I make it go by the colors, and I'm modulating the colors by time. What if I'm not done yet? So, let's create a noise node. Let's do simple noise. There we go. We can just make it. We can change this X, so we can actually scale it in or out. We can make it more or less noisy. We can actually offset potentially the UVs, but let's do another multiply. So let's multiply this noise by main color, and then multiply that by the time. This might break entirely. There we go. So now, again, this is not the prettiest thing, but now you get this noise pattern. So multiply the color by the noise, it got different noise. I can reverse or change some of these. So instead of let's see what happens. I'm actually not sure what's going to happen. Let's change. So let's multiply the noise by sine. And then multiply oh, and I'm actually doubling it because I'm multiplying by sine and then multiplying by again. Let's stick the color back in. Let's say this might actually not change it all at all. Right, because these things layer. So that didn't really change anything. Right, so your next step is to play around with boxes. See what happens when you create different nodes. We have some more procedurals, we have noise, we have shapes. So hit the rectangle. Let's get rid of that. Let's let's get rid of this. So I'm just kind of messing around right now. Let's multiply just the color by that. There. So will this do anything? Oh yeah, it overwrote the checkerboard. And so it actually just created this weird thing in the middle. Huh. Let's see what happens when I multiply this color times the square. Oh, so that's kind of UV, so it actually put the color just in the center. And then let's stick this into there. Let's stick this into the sine wave, and let's stick that into our main color. Again, let's save. Will that do anything? Oh, okay. Then that zooms just that in and out. So it's still checkerboarding, but also kind of just checkerboarding in this middle because um, these things feed into each other. So those are just some random explorations. For your assignment, make something. Play around with boxes, feed some things into other things, feed them into base color at the end, and see what you come up with. Make something that shimmers or changes or uses noise in an interesting way. Yeah, just splash out a little bit, play around, see what you can get this to do. So that's part one of episode 3D.